Welcome to the News and Why It Matters. I am Sara Gonzales. We have got a great show for you today. Mr. Stu Burguiere is back in town. Happy to have you back.
Thank you very much.
I guess. We've got Graham Allen.
It's aggressive.
Host of Rant Nation.
Wow, started off strong.
Since he lives here.
Jeez.
Since he lives here now.
Yep.
Back on the show. Happy to have you back. And Mr. Jeremy Dice from First Liberty. Religious liberty lawyer. Thanks for coming back and enlightening us.
I got to thank there at the end, too. I was worried there was just going to be a neutral introduction, but I got to thank you.
Happy to have all of you. Maybe we can work Ernest into this conversation.
I am the nation's foremost expert, apparently.
Who's to say? You never know. What's your top story, Stu?
So there's a new poll that really goes into depth and breaks down how Americans actually feel about abortion. And it is, I think, completely different than what most people would expect.
Oh, all right. Graham.
The greatest congresswoman in the hardest working, the greatest American AOC feels that Congress deserves a raise.
Okay.
Doing an amazing job, man.
Doing a lot of work.
Path.
A lot of work getting
telling
done there. A lot to get into. And Jeremy.
We're back to cake. We're talking about flowers and florists and the Supreme Court of the United States.
All right. A lot to get into. Obviously, first we want to thank our sponsor, American Financing. So if you are in the market for a home loan or a refi, whatever the case may be, American Financing is the one to go to. If you want someone, Stu, you can back me up on this, if you want someone who's actually in it for you and not, because they're trying to get a kickback from, the financial institutions.
Yeah, and maybe people who act responsibly. You might want American Financing. If you want
so that
shady
happened
people like me, there's loan sharks.
So Stu was like, I want to do something way too crazy for you guys.
Yeah.
And they call
it creative financing. That's what I do. But I mean, the good thing about American Financing is you're right, like they don't get the kickbacks. They don't care about trying to force you into one loan or another. They just care about making sure you pick the one that's going to work out for you long term. They want you as a long-term customer rather than just to take it and flip it and be done with it in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So they did a great job with me. I know Glenn's used them. A lot of people around here have, and a lot of our listeners have, because they're credible. I mean, they came to Glenn before the crash happened, and they did not make all these terrible loans. They didn't go out of business like everybody else. They've been around for a long time, and they know what they're doing.
And so they don't want you to go get your legs broken in the back of an alley somewhere because you didn't pay your bill.
That only happens when you don't pay. Like if you pay, loan sharks are fine.
You can go to AmericanFinancing.net or you can call 800-906-2440. All right, so you said that you saw some poll numbers on abortion that would surprise us.
It's a lot of really interesting stuff on this, and I think this is one of the most valuable polls out there. I believe it's Marist and NBC News who actually do it together, and you wouldn't say normally I would praise NBC News. But there's so much stuff out there that doesn't add any value to the conversation about abortion. How do people actually feel about it? Because they'll say, are you pro-choice or are you pro-life? Or do you think Roe versus Wade should be overturned? One thing, and I think you definitely agree with this, one thing you realize by looking at this polling is no one knows what Roe versus Wade says. They just put it in there for whatever they think abortion should be, and they all say, Roe versus Wade, it's fantastic. You actually look at it, there's a lot of things people don't understand. It's really without value to ask the average person if they are in favor of Roe versus Wade, because you can ask them, they'll say, I don't think it should be overturned, and then you press them on what you think the law should be, and they want something far more restrictive than what Roe versus Wade allows. Right. So let me give you some of this, and this first one I think shows how much this has moved recently as far as the polling goes. This is June 2019. Are you pro-choice or pro-life? 57% say they are pro-choice, and only 35% say that are pro-life. To give you another point of reference here, in February of the same year, it was 47-47. So whatever, the media is doing its job, right? Like their goal is to vilify anyone who is pro-life, and because of some of these laws maybe that are passing in places like Alabama, they're doing everything they can to try to make the pro-life side be extreme. However, when you dive into these numbers, it doesn't make any sense that a lot of these people are calling themselves pro-choice. So let me give you some of the kind of separate sort of issues that are surrounding the abortion debate. And here are some pro-life suggestions, things that have been suggested by the pro-life side to change the laws in state to state. Should women be required to view ultrasounds before they go ahead with an abortion? Well, that's a popular policy. 52% say yes, 43% say no. And interestingly, about the 52%, that includes about a third of people who say they're pro-choice. So it's like an interesting part of that, the people who are for abortion still want this. Should there be a required 24-hour waiting period for abortions? Well, again, the American people say yes, 65 to 30. Now, this is something that's seen as like this hateful policy in the media. It's 65-30 and includes 68% of pro-choice and 59% of pro-life respondents.
Wow.
Huge, right? I mean, and the only reason the pro-life number is down is because a lot of people are saying, well, you shouldn't have any abortions at all. So,
Right.
like, I don't care about the requirement. But people who are pro-choice think, yeah, you should have it. It shouldn't just be one of those things you walk in and just do it. You should have the waiting period. Should abortion doctors be required to have hospital admitting privileges? This has been a very controversial thing. Well, it's not controversial to the American people. 64 to 27. I mean, that's like...
Imagine that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
It's
wow.
not even remotely close. And that includes 68% of pro-choice voters and 59% of pro-life respondents. So again, like these things are kind of like, it's not really...
And that one really is spun in the media as, oh, well, you just want women to go get back alley abortions,
Exactly.
and then they're going to die.
I mean, they should talk to the people who are pro-choice because they don't seem to...
Hey, people realize what that means. If you have to have privileges, that means that something's gone wrong in your surgery.
Right.
And the doctor who's not doing it at a hospital has to go with you to the hospital, but he can't get in there unless he's got privileges to
Right.
be in that hospital.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a pretty important little thing to have here. And
Yeah.
it also says that the hospital has looked at this guy and say, yeah, he's qualified to practice medicine. The dirty secret, of course, is that a lot of these abortionists don't have the ability to get those privileges or have them local. In fact, I know of an abortion clinic in Charleston, West Virginia. It's a mile away from the hospital. None of the abortionists that provide procedures there have admitting privileges at that hospital. They cannot follow their patient to the hospital.
It's incredible. And of course, part of that too is in Roe versus Wade is exceptions for states to regulate, to help protect the women's health. So, I'm sure, every pro-abortion person is very much for women's health, unless it means that they can't get the abortions that they want, right? Like, so it makes it a little bit more difficult, perhaps a little bit more expensive. However, you're protecting, the mother, and that is supposedly what they care about. At least that's what they tell us. So where does life begin? I found this to be pretty interesting. They have a whole menu of options. I've tried to summarize these a little bit because there's so many of them. So this one's this is a birth, 16%. What I thought interesting about that is the litmus test of the Democratic Party right now. You have to believe life begins at birth, right? Well, what's the hateful extremist right-wing position that we hear all the time? It's these heartbeat laws, right? This is the heartbeat laws. Well, look at the difference in polling here. People believe the heartbeat is the start of life at 46% to 16%.
Wow.
The Republican position or the conservative position is far larger than you'd know by watching the media. This is interesting too. What do you believe the law should actually be regarding abortion? This is where I've kind of done some summaries. The George W. Bush standard, okay, then that's much more restrictive than we are right now. This is just exceptions for life, rape, and incest. And we've talked about all these, and we can get into all of them. But 47% say it should be either George W. Bush's standard or more restrictive. Also, the George W. Bush standard is also the same as the Mormon Church standard, right? Like this is not like a left-wing position here, but that's half the country. If you add it to the first trimester, which again, I'm not for, but just to give you an idea, first trimester or more restrictive, this is a more restrictive position than Roe versus Wade. 70% of Americans want us to go beyond Roe versus Wade to the conservative side.
Wow.
And then the 2020, of course, Democratic primary litmus test, your opportunity to choose at any point if you're a woman, only 18% believe that. So if you think that 47% for the Mormon Church standard versus 18% for the Democratic Party, which one seems like it's more popular? Which one seems like more people are on the side?
Isn't it funny, though, that 18% believe that these radical things of abortion and late-term abortion and post-birth abortion in some manners, isn't it weird that the media makes you believe that that's what the majority of not only women but people believe in what they do? I was just at a young women's conference, and one of the major issues that every single speaker was asked about was abortion and men's stances on abortion. And I would be extremely interested to see what the ratio between male and female were to those percentages there, because I truly believe that we need more men to step up and defend our unborn children just as much as women should. And so it's just interesting to me that those numbers, 18% of this crazy, just you can end the life of a child whenever you want to kind of thing, only 18% are. But to watch the media right now and to listen to these Hollywood elitists and to listen to these figures on social media, you would think that we're the crazy ones.
Yeah.
Kind of
We're the
thing.
extremists.
Yeah.
It's not terribly surprising, though, that people can't figure out when life begins under the law. I remember being in law school, handling this case, had a very liberal professor talking about it in con law, and his very first question of the whole class was, when does the court say, in Roe v. Wade, when does the court say when life begins? And of course, everybody's ducking under the table because nobody wants to be called on that day. And then all of a sudden, some smarties get up there to want to answer the question. Well, 16 weeks, 12 weeks, 14 weeks, third trimester, none of them had the answer right. So I finally raised my hand and said, well, Professor, it doesn't. And the truth is, Roe v. Wade doesn't say when life begins. And in fact, it leaves a lot of room to the states to say, you guys can handle all this. In fact, if I would be happy at this point of just going back to Roe v. Wade, let alone before Roe v. Wade, to allow the states to have their freedom to be able to regulate that practice. Now, I'd rather go beyond all that, of course, but if we could only get back to Roe v. Wade, that would be a great standard to have. It's been all the ones that have followed up after that have been absolutely horrible. So I have no doubt that the world is confused because the justices are confused and lawyers are confused by when it all is. And I think the left really loves that confusion. They play upon it and prey upon it so that people will continue to push these pro-abortion laws that are out there.
I agree. I think that especially when it comes to viability,
Yeah.
right? Because that's something that even if you go back to Roe versus Wade, viability at that point in time was much different than it is now with all of the modern, medical advancements that we have. So, I mean, even that would be, they would love it if we could have this conversation about viability and keep it kind of, muddy the waters. But we just saw, what was it, a baby that was born at 23 weeks. It was the world's smallest baby ever.
Baby went home.
Yeah, went home, left the hospital after 5 months, healthy, happy, everyone was fine. I mean, and they would have you believe that that still is not a baby that could survive.
Brought up that the youngest baby ever born was, I think, at 21 or 22 weeks, but the mother had to lie to the doctors and say the baby was further along to get the life, supporting treatment that the baby needed. That's completely ridiculous. The one thing I think you brought up a great point, Brenda, of like, this is a situation where the Democratic Party is being completely summarized as this 16%, right? Like this 16 or 18% who think, abortion all the way there. And the one person or the one campaign that seems to understand that that's not reality is Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Biden, like, for whatever reason, and he's not been that outspoken on abortion, but generally speaking, he's not all out there touting Medicare for all. He wants to say he's super progressive, he's Obama, but he's the only one not playing to essentially Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I don't think it's a coincidence, the fact that he's blowing everybody out, right? Like this is, I don't think he actually is moderate, but he's smart enough and they've done a good job so far. Number one, keeping him out from in front of cameras. But number two, having a situation
I love Joe Biden in front of the camera.
Yeah, no, I do too. I'm a big fan.
I am a huge fan of anytime camera, Joe Biden TV.
Yes.
I'm there.
I'm there.
Just don't ask him about Hyde.
No.
Because then it's a problem.
Oh, yeah.
Or was it a problem?
Right, I can't remember.
It depends on what's today again?
But like that's an extreme position, right? To be able to say, look, I think abortions are fine, but we shouldn't force people who are morally opposed to them to have their tax dollars spent that way. That's now extreme. It used to be the Democratic position, the answer, like, well, we safe, legal, and rare, but we'll at least not make the government fund it. Now even that's crazy. And he's been back and forth on it, it seems, but like it seems where he landed was actually, no, I still support the Hyde Amendment, which is kind of amazing in this context.
Graham, last word.
Well, I think the DNC, to your point, the DNC, you're talking about these small percentages. We saw it happen with Sanders in 2016. Sanders with his radical ideas of socialism, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, they pushed him aside and went to Hillary, the safer, more normal Democratic choice. Same thing with Biden. You've got this these entities that have come up, and I call them the mean girls of Congress. You've got AOC, Tlaib, and Omar. In my opinion, they represent this extreme small percentage, but they are loud, and they are being heard everywhere, and especially younger generations. So we have a responsibility to fight back, or 10 years from now, it may be a completely different kind of
and then they're full of just AOCs. Oh, God, shoot me now.
Nightmare.
Back in a minute.
Oh, God, I couldn't take the yapping.
No.
Constant. blown out.
Before we get back into the AOC conversation, want to thank our sponsor, Cruise Through History. So if you have not yet already, mark your calendars for spring 2020. It's in March, Stu?
It is.
Okay, in March, this guy over here is going on a cruise along with Glenn Beck, Bill O'Reilly, Rabbi Lapin, and David Barton, and they're going to the Eastern Mediterranean. And I'm just super jealous. Where are you going to go? You're going to Jerusalem, Venice,
yes,
Croatia,
Greece. It's going to be a great trip. I mean, you could sit around just walking through the halls and catch David Barton, like not even talking about that. And he'll go for a half an hour, and it'll be fascinating about history. Like actually being there and having him explain those things in person, I think is going to be incredible. Rabbi Lapin the same way. Bill O'Reilly, of course, is honestly one of the biggest history book salesmen of all time. He's like an author who's sold more history books than almost anybody. I mean, not anybody, but there's been a few exceptions of books back in the past. But he's, I mean, a modern, he was a history professor. He knows all that stuff. And then, then you get to come with me and have fun. Like, sure, you're going to have Glenn, blah, 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 blah. And then you can go with me. I'll be at the bar. Find me at the bar with the Italian food.
Once school's over,
exactly.
We'll have some fun afterwards. Yeah.
There's days and there's nights on cruises.
Yeah.
You can go to comesailaway.com. There are a couple different packages, different options that you can pick. You can make those selections and mark your calendars. Go to comesailaway.com. So speaking of AOC, she is everywhere. She's just doing so much, though, Graham. Yeah. She's just doing so much
She's
for
almost
the country.
Omnipresent at this point. She's just everywhere.
She is.
You can't get away from her. She's doing more than any congresswoman or congressman ever in the history of Congress.
Finally, someone's saying it.
That's how she would say it too.
I know. Yeah. She is when they came up with the idea for congressman or woman, AOC was it, and it's time that they get a raise. So I don't know if we have the video.
We do.
But check it out what she said.
Members of Congress, retail workers, everybody should get cost of living increases to accommodate for the changes in our economy. And then when we don't do that, it only increases the pressure on members to exploit loopholes like insider trading loopholes to make it on the back end. So
do you think there's a tendency of members to obviously take it out on this institution because it's an optics issue? They don't want to seem like that.
And that's my issue, is that it's superficial. You can vote against pay increases all you want. It's, in my opinion, it's not even like a raise. It's a cost of living adjustment. So you can vote against a cost of living adjustment all you want, and it'll look good on its surface, but it will every cost of living adjustment that gets bypassed is voting to increase the pressure to exploit loopholes and legal loopholes to kind of lean on other ways to enrich oneself through service. And so my whole side of it is like, it may not be optics, it may not be great optics, it may not
language are you speaking?
Look the best in terms of your opponents could use it as a political issue, but in substance.
She's incredible.
I swear she just starts talking, having no idea what she's going to say next. Words come out.
So just real quick, a little. I like to find like the little gems in the thing, and I believe Jesus has a sense of humor, man. And so AOC is one of the major social justice warriors that goes against our men and women in blue, things like this. She's always talking about corruption in police departments and all this and all that. But what she's talking about here is one of the very things that they get mad at policemen about. We underpay our police officers. They go out there and put their life on the line every day. And then we have these cops, good people that are put in bad decisions, where all these corruption things happen. And then bam, there she is right there saying, if you don't pay us more in Congress, then we're going to figure out these loopholes, and that's when we're going to get corrupt and we're going to make our money elsewhere, right as a cop is walking by. And there he is right there. Just the irony of that whole thing, and then a cop walking by at the exact moment. I found it absolutely hilarious.
Well, I don't know how you could really compare policeman going to work every day and AOC putting her life at risk every day.
She already makes more than 70% of America. Yeah. She made, what is Congress, 170, I think, something like that, $1,000 a year. Plus, I mean, let's just be honest here. There's a lot of benefits to being a congressman or a congresswoman. They have.
I love that you're so PC with that.
They have travel budgets. They have. Well, I'm good friends with a lot of congressmen now. You have travel budgets. You have staffing budgets. people buy your food all the time. You attend this, you attend that. You don't really drive yourself anywhere very, very often. So I don't understand. Tell that to the man and woman working 80 hours a week that can't send their kid to summer camp because they got to figure out how to take a loan to be able to do it, or they have to pay a bill with a credit card and then rob Peter to pay Paul. Just stop talking. Just stop.
If we're going to be income equal, why are we always talking about pay raises for Congress?
Yeah.
Couldn't we do pay suppression for Congress? I mean, these are supposed to be people who serve the United States citizens. Maybe they could do it voluntarily. Yeah. I'm sure there are a number of citizens in this country who would love to volunteer to be a congressman, just so that they could stop doing this kind of silliness on things. It fascinates me that we're always expected to have things go up, 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 and up. They never come down, down, and down again, or level out ever again. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, go ahead, Stu.
Oh no, I was just going to say the last time we amended the Constitution was on this very issue. It was the 27th Amendment. And you're going to help me with this.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yep, and and it's a fascinating story if you don't know the story. But it got launched back in the day, like with the founders, and the concept was you can't raise your pay in Congress until there's been another election. So you have to be basically held to this standard where at least they get to call you out if you're trying to raise your pay all the time. And it floundered. It just sat there, was not ratified for a couple hundred years.
It was 200 years in the 80s. And some guy was doing his master's thesis and realized, wait a minute, there was no sunset provision on this thing. And so he resurrected it. And I think it's the 28th Amendment, actually, when I think about it. That now that we have that you can't vote yourself a raise, which is what AOC is asking us to do.
Yeah, and they brought it back, and under, I think it was George H.W. Bush, it was finally ratified, and it's it's the one thing we can actually come together on, that Congress does not need more money, but here's AOC telling us that she does.
By the way, that's also why the First Amendment is now the First Amendment and not the Third Amendment. That was ahead in order.
Oh, really? Was it really?
That's right.
Huh. Can we also talk about this lie? This absolute lie that is the living wage of $15 an hour that her and Sanders and all these people seem to be, but they refuse to be honest about it. I think every state's a little different, the minimum wage, but I think the national average is like $8 and something. I mean, if they put them all together, and they want to raise it to a living wage of $15 an hour minimum kind of thing. But what they refuse to talk about, the fact is, if you do that, and if you cost these businesses and all this stuff more money, everything else becomes more expensive. So that $15 an hour is the same thing as the $8 that you're in now, because that's just not how it works. You can't just say, well, we're just going to pay people more money, and then they'll be more comfortable based off the way that things are priced right now. Well, no, everything else also goes up with that at the same time. That's not how it works. And I just find that absolutely hilarious, this $15 an hour thing. So.
You mean to tell me that companies are actually passing that cost to the consumer? They're not just going to eat it themselves?
Well, but that's what I mean. So you can do that, and then you're actually going to have less jobs.
Right.
Because they're going to hire less people because the incentive's gone and all this stuff. And so it's just...
I also find it interesting, people who are who are avid followers of AOC, who follow her brand of, socialism. Yeah, we want socialism. We're on board with socialism. You would point out to them that socialism always ends in, corrupt power. And they're like, well, that's not socialism. That's just something different. That's, that's just a dictator. But you look at the types of things that AOC has been saying. She's constantly saying, we're the ones in power. You guys sit down in the cheap seats. She's saying, we deserve a raise. She's already starting that
I'm the boss. How about that?
Yeah.
Yes, she's already starting that, and she just got in.
Yeah.
Imagine what she would do if she did have that power.
Same thing. Let's try the same thing again and expect a different result. What's the definition of something?
Something, yeah.
Think about that.
AOC insanity, the same thing. It all kind of goes
It's the same thing. Back in a minute.
They always target McDonald's too with a $15 minimum wage, just like of all places.
McDonald's put the cost.
Got about a minute before we go into overtime. Graham, I want you to tell everyone you have an amazing podcast out with Candace Owens.
Yes, so we have the Dear America podcast now, and I don't know why, but we're doing pretty well in the charts. And so we were very lucky to have Candace Owens on this episode, so everybody should go and check it out anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Check it out, subscribe, make sure to rate it 5 stars. I mean, you're obviously going to enjoy it.
Obviously.
But no, Candace, I met her for the first time when she was here in town for that, and she is just amazing.
Yeah.
She is so smart. She is
On
so
all the
quick.
time.
Yes,
All the time.
all the time. So make sure that you check that out, and then subscribe to blazetv.com if you have not already. You can use promo code NEWS for $10 off your annual subscription, and then you get to catch these awesome things like Overtime, which is happening right now.